Hi, welcome to Foreigner in the Philippines. I've just been looking through the comments on Beth's driving video. It amazes me how different some of the comments are. One lady was really quite abusive in saying that Beth was a terrible driver. And then there are others who say, great, you did terrific, I couldn't do that. Right down to comments about the truck. How if you drive in first gear for extended periods, then it will damage the motor. I'm just thinking that what doesn't seem to come across in the videos is the speed at which we're driving, and that is a very tricky road. Even for someone who is an experienced driver, it's a tricky road. In fact, it's not a road. It's a packed earth path. It deteriorates quite badly in parts and is a challenge, I can tell you. Well, Beth meets those challenges and she actually does it very well. Now, she goes between first and second gear. Now, when I drive it, and I drive it what some of you have said is too fast, I don't go beyond second or third gear. Now, I'm not a mechanic, but I beg to differ about the idea that driving in one particular gear, albeit the first or the second gear, will damage the engine. The motor is running at revs. The motor runs at revs per minute, doesn't it? Now, depending on the gear you're in, it runs at revs per minute, and the motor doesn't change. Depending on the quality and the power of the motor, it will go to a certain rev per minute safely and without damaging itself above normal wear. When you're driving along in our little truck in what seems to be too fast a speed for a lot of you on the highway, I'll be in fifth gear. The motor, irrespective of the gear, the motor is doing, say, 2000 revs per minute. Now, when we're driving along in first gear, there's obviously some very clever guys out there who are into mechanics and can measure the angle of the dangle and can correct me on this if I'm wrong. It's doing a certain revs per minute, and as far as the engine is concerned, the revs per minute are what govern the amount of wear. Now, if you hear people revving the life out of something that is not supposed to go above, let's pick a number and say 4,000 or 5,000, that tiny little three-cylinder motor that's in the red, then it's going to be punished by the number of revs. Now, when Beth drives along, she doesn't go out of, say, first gear. It takes about 10 minutes to get down to the road. So we drive along in first gear for 10 minutes. What are the revs? What are the revs per minute? Well, the speed in first gear that we're doing is about 6 or 7 miles an hour. That's the safe speed for a learner driver, for a student driver, driving that kind of challenging road. We're talking about, really, about the light end of 4x4 driving. This is off-road 4x4 driving. And it is quite appropriate to drive, I would think, in first gear. Now, when friends who have come along, who are very experienced, aged, and certainly not as aged as I am, but getting on there, and they've come along, they're experienced drivers, and the most that they will be able to do on our newly compacted road is third gear. But what are the revs? Probably 2,000 to 3,000 revs per minute. Beth drives in first gear. What are the revs? probably about 1,000 to 1,500 revs per minute. Correct me if I'm wrong. Have I been logical in doing that? Now the other thing is that we got some terrific life experience suggestions. One particular suggestion is very much like what I usually do when I've got the ideal clear space place to teach someone. They suggested that the way that they had taught their daughter was what she called, this lady called, wheel placement. And she would put a soda can and she would get her daughter to reach the point where she could place the wheel on the soda can, and off it would go, and you would know that you'd succeeded. So my own thing was that you should be able to place the vehicle between 2 points. Now when you are approaching another vehicle on, say, a narrow road, certainly we have that challenge when we're on our path down to the road. We'll get a tricycle coming the other way, or motorcycle, and in some cases, if it's Oping, our neighbour, that's about the only other vehicle that's down there, unless it's a delivery vehicle. You have to be able to judge between the vehicle that's oncoming and what you have left of the road, and that's a skill that has to be developed if you're hoping to keep a vehicle intact and live to a ripe old age. For myself, I would make up two poles suspended, so you would drive between 2 points, and in keeping with teaching someone on a gradient so that they don't start to think that they'll never be able to do it, you set the poles wide apart, and the person says, yeah, I can get between those, and they get between them. And then as you gradually pull them in and in and in that sequence of events, the person learns to know the actual width of her vehicle and how to place it between 2 points. I remember that in Florida, when I took my then stepdaughter for her test and my then wife, Chinese wife, for their driver's license, that was one of the things that they had to do. They had to reverse into a spot which was marked by 2 cones, and they had to do that. So in other words, they had to do what I had taught them to do. Now there in Florida, it's very easy to teach someone to drive, because you can take them out to, on a Sunday, you can take them out to a parking lot at one of the universities, and it seems like there's acres for them to drive around in, for you to set up your little challenges of the vehicle placement or wheel placement, and you can teach them very easily, and they can go forward, they can do emergency stops and the whole thing. We're rather limited here because I'm not prepared to take Beth out onto the national highway, that strip of insanity that drives past the bottom of our road from Etafi into Taliban. Not just yet. We'll find a place. I understand that there are places where it's fairly civilized in terms of a paved road, but it's not frequented by too many other vehicles. So we will get to that. Beth doesn't actually get to drive that much, and sooner or later, of course, we know that she will have to do that. But we are going ahead, and we're going to be teaching Rado to drive, and that will be very useful because he'll be able to drive the Red if ever we need materials for the work that we're doing on the house here. At the moment, he does those pickups and deliveries with his tricycle, because he has this, what I call a commercial tricycle, a commercial sidecar for carrying materials, sacks of rice and all that kind of stuff. So he usually does it for us in that. But he'll be able to drive in an emergency. He will be able to drive the little Red, and I know that he will be a fast learner. So, as for the derogatory remarks, like things that I can never quite understand, women should never be allowed to drive. You know, we handled this, what is it, 150 years ago, or whatever, the suffragette movement. Women chained themselves to the White House railings to overcome this kind of thing, and in other places too, Buckingham Palace probably. So we should be over that. There are good and bad in all situations. One of the things that I would like to make a comment on was how the arrival of these, really I would count them as expensive, pretty sophisticated vehicles that are arriving here and can be had on finance, so you can take out a loan. It's staggering when you think of the price of these vehicles in pesos, and if you think about the price in pesos, boy, to me it's staggering anyway. Paying 1.5 million anything for a vehicle is staggering to me, and that's probably what something like a Ford Ranger costs, and any of that ilk. So you've got the Toyota Hilux, and then you've got the other vehicles that are too numerous to put down here, and they all do that size of vehicle, and then the slightly smaller one down. Once people get that, a lot of people get that quality of vehicle and sophistication of vehicle in one of those, the Ranger or any of those others, Toyota Hilux, and they're relative novice drivers. The training is just not available here to learn how to handle those vehicles. Let's face it, you're talking about a very fast vehicle in any of that range. Any of the they do 4x4s, they do, those are fast vehicles. I mean, they're fast handling. They are what, certainly me as an old timer, I had an MGB and an MGC sports car, and boy, I could now sit in that with my hat turned on backwards and hunched over the wheel, thinking that I was moving the earth, and something like a Ford Ranger could steam past me as if I was standing still. So it's a big thing now that is happening on the highways, and it's of some concern because as the training is not there, what happens is you get comparative high level of skill when it comes to actually driving the vehicle, but what is lacking is in road sense, and people don't learn that. Now, in the US or in any of the Western countries, foreigners learn by their father or mother, and they watch their father or mother driving. Now, especially out, say, on farms all over the world, kids are driving by the time they're 7 or 8. Now, they're riding motorcycles here at that age, but that's because they just take the bike and go out on the road, and they don't stop at the road. They'll do that trip down to the road on a bike, and then they're fearless. These kids are fearless, and they're skillful at riding the bike. There's a delineation there. They're skillful at riding the bike, but they don't know how to interact with other vehicles on the road. And here, the rules of survival are not the same as the rules of good road sense. If somebody overtakes you in the West, it will be assumed, unless it's a terrible mistake, it will be assumed that they have judged the distance between themselves, you, and an oncoming, whatever oncoming vehicle is there, and they'll have made that so that they can tuck back into the road ahead of you in a safe time frame before the other vehicle comes barreling down. Now, that doesn't happen here. Very often, a vehicle that wants to overtake you will pull out, draw level with you, and then start beeping their horn for you to pull back. Can you imagine a situation like that in the West? Unless the driver was a little bit loopy, I would have thought. But that's what happens here. As a matter of course, in my policy of driving, in my own set of rules for survival, what in America they call defensive driving, I was always told in America, people teaching someone to drive would say, you assume that everybody else on the road is a complete and utter idiot and they're going to do everything wrong. And then you will drive defensively, because if you believe or accept for a moment that you're on a road with a load of lunatics, you'll know that you've got to be very, very careful. And it's a good rule of thumb. Now here, you have to have a different way of thinking. If somebody, especially one of the white vans are like the suicide drivers who are on a death wish, and they want to take the 18 or 20 people that are in the van with them when they go. And they will toot their horn and in the most impossible places will overtake you. Now, in the West, you might actually suffer an ego trip and say, what the hell? You can't overtake here. It's not safe. And you'll actually accelerate forward and make them draw back quickly, brake and drop back, and that will be it. Then you'd have to deal with road rage. Here, the obvious thing to do is to quiet the ego and pull back. So something is, especially, as I say, one of the vans, if it pulls out and it's going to overtake, whatever the heck is going on, they will overtake, no matter on blind bends, no matter on hills, no matter approaching the brow of the hill, they will overtake. And your best survival method is to pull back sharply. And actually, when you have vehicles oncoming who are in the overtaking mode and are pulled out on head to head with your trip, your route, your line on your side of the road, they will pull out, and if there is no giving away on the other two cars, the one overtaking and the one being overtaken, if there's no give and take on that, you better damn well do it yourself and be ready to pull off the road. I know that it sounds crazy, but then I like to be home before dark. And the reason for that is all of the reasons that I've just told you here, plus the fact that about 40 or 50 or sometimes 60% of motorcyclists and tricycles do not have any lights on at night. I don't know how they see, but they do. And when they are on the road, you don't know that they're there if it's in the dark, because roads are not lit out here. So things are in darkness, and unless it's the light from a sari store or a house that is lit, you have no way of knowing. Now when vehicles are approaching, they don't have, as I say, they don't have the taught, they don't have the training to know the importance of dipping their headlights. So they may come on to you blasting away, or, strangely enough, they may dip their lights, and then when they are about 20 feet from you, they put their full headlights on again. It's an ironic thing. Add to that all of the people driving around with no lights on, people walking along the road, people thinking locally, thinking their local barangay, and that's their main road, and they if they're going to pop out and they're going to go along to see grandma or somebody in the next barangay, and it's only 2 miles, they're not thinking in a going, say, a 2-hour trip. They're not thinking that way at all. They're driving along probably in bare feet or with flip-flops. It's a totally different way of looking at things. So to get back to Beth, she will do fine. She is doing fine. We make videos. You have to understand this. I always have to explain this, but you have to understand we make videos, and we're not going to sit there. I'm not going to be like the voice of doom, and if I say something like, get out of the friggin' ditch, somebody noticed that, and then somebody said, give her some encouragement, you know, you're confusing her. We are two people who are very happy together, and we do not give each other a bad time when Beth is, after all, receiving a driver's lesson. Now, I'm only human, by the way, haven't applied for sainthood or anything. I believe that if you say stop and they don't stop, then the next time that you say stop, it won't be stop, it will be stop. And then if it's anything after that, then you're going to be talking loud, and that's got nothing to do whether you have a happy marriage or not, okay? That's talking about instant survival in the moment. So, thanks to all of those, thank you very much to all of those who have given such encouragement to Beth on her driving. She is doing great. It's a challenging road, and even experienced motorheads, and I use that in the nicest possible way, people like Kerry from Australia who has come over. He builds performance cars, knows about driving. Kevin from New Zealand. Kevin from New Zealand, in his time of youth, used to be that madman that was on the sidecar of these combos that raced their special motorcycles, which go at mind-blowing speed, and the man on the motorcycle, which is the minimum that you could call a sidecar, throws himself out inches away from the road, which is going by 60, 70, 80 miles an hour to get them round corners, and he is the floating balance point. That's what Kevin did. And them and others all say that you cannot know our road until you have driven it. It doesn't come across the way that it really is. So actually, Beth is doing a hell of a lot better than a hell of a lot of you think. But anyway, thanks for looking in. This is A Foreigner in the Philippines. Bye for now. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Good on you.